Today I'm talking to Amy Kiefer. Amy Kiefer is a C-suite executive in the Twin Cities where she's worked with multiple mid-sized family-owned companies and helping them grow. And her real focus is on building teams and allowing those teams to perform. And so, Amy, in our conversations, that focus on team building has really come out strongly. So, can you start by describing how you really build a team and allow it to shine?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Matt. And allowing teams to shine, I think, is probably the best thing we can do for an organization. There's all kinds of organizational, operational, market influences on our companies, but at the end of the day, the talent is really, really critical. But I think, maybe you can help me is define what it means to shine. And I think, I gave a little bit of a thought to this, and thank you again for giving me a little bit of heads up on the question beforehand. But, I would define shine as an individual that is on our team, that is engaged, that is purpose filled, that is happy, right? That is supportive of everything around them, that's aligned to the organization and to others within that organization, and that has a gut that's filled with care and compassion and ongoing continual optimization of everything around them, including themselves. Anything you'd add to that? If you could get that person and that was what shine meant, I think we all want shine. We all want to be that shining star. What would you add anything to that, Matt?
No, not really. It's about allowing a person to be their very best and allowing it to show for them to be able to look at their performance and be proud of their performance and know that they're recognized. Those are really the elements that come true to me.
Yeah. So hopefully I captured those as well. And if that's the case, so if that's how we're defining it, I think there's three key areas, at least as I reflect upon leadership and what I would aspire to be as well as try to be, is first and foremost is transparency. And with transparency, I believe that you also inspire engagement. And so what that is ensuring the right information is given to that person at the right time and for the right reasons. And without transparency, I think that's really the ante to beginning to develop that relationship with any of your employees. I think the second piece then comes a little bit more into the accountability factor. And with accountability, what we hope for and what we hope to inspire is ownership. And that can take many facets, but it's really ensuring that that person feels part of a greater good, part of a broader team, part of a piece of the puzzle that is going to get us from X to Y. And I think that they have to ensure an understanding. They have to appreciate and align to what that specific organization is doing, as well as their contribution to that greater good. And this also comes into a little bit more of the metrics, the KPIs, holding them accountable into the objectives. And that's where I think real good leaders shine, because you can be transparent, but you've got to also have and develop that accountability and that enabling of their ownership of what they're doing, why they're doing it. And I think it also, keeps them aligned across functions and across the strategic initiatives that are within that organization. And ideally, that accountability drives that ownership, and you let them go crazy within their role, go crazy with what they're doing, and give them that freedom, but yet they're aligned, and that they're working within something, and they know that that's a greater good. So that second piece is the accountability, which then, of course, leads to ownership, which is critical. And then I think the third piece is building within an organization and a culture an evolutionary mindset. And, to help everybody shine, they need to also be part of where we're going and how we're getting there. So that continuous improvement and that an evolutionary mindset really comes back to development and growth. And that's not only growth of the individual who's shining, but it's growth of the company then. And those two come hand in hand. I think I go into every situation, no one's perfect, no thing is perfect, no situation is perfect. So how do we constantly think about making it better? And I think for someone to shine in a culture that is very evolutionary minded is bringing them into that fold to help it get better. And then that ownership takes place and they know what they need to know to be able to then feel successful. So I'll pause there and get your reaction or see if you have questions or additional thoughts.
No, I think those are three very important elements. Amy, the other part that really leaps to mind goes back to transparency, kind of in the other direction, making it visible that it's them doing their work. Often somebody can be overshadowed by their boss who's presenting the results. Having that transparency, that their recognition of what they're doing, strikes me as another very important pillar of allowing somebody to really shine in an organization.
Completely agree. I think all of these three elements, and I think you kind of hit on it, but trust.
Yeah.
With transparency comes trust. And I've been in a lot of these organizations who are founder led
Mm-hmm.
for all the right reasons, are very very a little bit protective of their financial situation, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to, as an outsider coming in, respect that. But sometimes your team also needs the metrics, and they need the right financial as well as other knowledge to know where we're going, how we're getting there, and what the incremental milestones are to achieve the final result. And so I think with that whole piece of transparency, as well as the accountability and ownership, as well as that continual improvement and evolutionary mindset, is that trust has got to unfold. And out of those three things, it's that halo factor of trust that, without trust, you really don't have a lot. With trust, you have a team that is ready to take on any possible, any possible mountain in front of us. And I think those components that provide that trust come back to, that level of accountability, because they do own it, they feel it, and they are trusted to be a part of something much bigger. And, I often look at levels of transparency in organizations, and I think that's a critical piece, as well as obviously the accountability, ownership, and then the evolutionary mindset.
Thinking about trust, when you think about a family-owned business, often there can be low turnover, or the founder's been there for 30, 40 years, and so anybody who comes into that business is, they're new, and they can be new for a long time. How do you ramp up that trust really quickly? How do you get that person to become part of a team when that team might have been existing in some form or another for years or decades? How do you
Yeah.
ramp up that trust quickly?
Yeah, I think you're coming in from the outside, and with, there's generally, to your point, there's often loyalty over 20 years, sometimes averages, well over 15, 16, 17 years. And, it takes a while. You've got to give it time. You've got to show who you are. And you've got to just get engaged with them and let them get to know you at a much deeper level. So I would say, not that I've really thought about this, but I think when I go in, I'm pretty much me, and pretty much open, and pretty much, internally transparent to who I am, and sharing that. And that tends to break those barriers down. And again, if you lead with actions that you would expect not only of yourself in spades, but that you would also expect of others, that's how the culture then shifts. And, maybe they don't have that evolutionary mindset. Maybe everything's been really good, and you are feeling like this stability is what's comfortable. When that external person comes in and says, oh, we can do this, you've got to really begin to bring them along, and that's where that trust piece is. But I wouldn't say it's overt. I would say it's a work in progress every time you join from the outside coming into those organizations. And you have to be patient. You have to figure out how you make that trust happen. And it's different in every situation I've been in, and different with really every person. And so that's where the more you get to know the talent, and the more, especially if they're on your team,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to embrace, that everyone's a little bit different in what they need and how their development is, and how we can help them to get us to the next level. And again, those three factors of helping them shine is actually what can also augment that trust.
So some people that you bring in, they're extroverts. They want to get in there. They want to talk about their life outside work. They want to engage. They create friendly relationships quickly. Some people are on the other side. They're more introverted. They're less comfortable about talking about, family outside work. How is building trust and, integrating people and allowing them to shine with extroverts and introverts different?
Well, you noted the differences. Some are not going to be as forthcoming with their life story or with their world outside of work, and some are going to be wanting to talk about it, at any point. And I think that's the beauty of how each of us are our DNA and how we're made. I think the true leader can bring those folks into an environment, into a meeting, into a situation, into initiatives, strategies, objectives, you name it, and make those people understand each other and respect each other, because that's also the foundation of trust, is respect and appreciation. And if you can get that group to understand, and it's great that somebody's telling us on Monday morning what their weekend was. We all love to hear that, but it's managing that to the person that doesn't and bringing them into the fold comfortably, but they don't maybe have to tell us about their entire weekend, because that's not how they are. But I think more importantly than anything is creating the safe environment. And by that, I'm not talking physical safety. I'm talking the safety and the culture that allows you to talk and say what you feel and mean, and that it's protected within this group. Again, it comes back to that trust of a team, and the teams that trust one another are really the teams that not only shine, but they take companies to whole new heights that aren't even envisioned in some cases by the original founder or by what the organization is at point T0 until you get to that point. And so, everybody's different. Everybody's different for development. Everybody's different for how they show up. And you just have to, as a leader, be able to navigate and to facilitate a greater good by the whole, and respecting and appreciating each other for who you are.
So can we get a little bit more deterministic here? Can we talk specifically about building up that trust and making people feel safe? The term people like to use right now is psychological safety. But how do you put somebody, they might have been in an organization before where the messenger was shot. How do you put them into a position where they're willing to stand up, they're willing to stick their head up above the fence in your organization, speak up, tell you what's not working, tell you what is working? How do you get somebody working in that mode?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a challenging question. I mean, I think tolerance comes to mind. What do you tolerate? What do you not tolerate? And as a leader, I think it's our role to make those control limits, if you will, very clear. And so if there's somebody that off the cuff makes a comment that might not be great, or might not add to the value of the conversation, you can't take that comment back. But what you can say is, hey, Bill, I think what you really meant to say there is this, and get the group talking. I think supporting people when they do speak, if you can tell they're not comfortable. I also think at the right time with the right folks, drawing them forward and saying, Sally, I see you thinking. Can you tell me what you're thinking? Or, Sally, you sent something to me the other day that I thought was really great. Would you be able to share that with the group and bring those people together? And the more you do that, and the more you support the right behavior, the better that safety, so to speak, will feel. And it is a work in process, and you can have one bomb that goes off and it takes you back several. I mean, it's all about the relationships and that building. What you want is to have that trust that everybody knows that no matter what, we've got each other's back, and that we're all rowing in the same direction towards that end state for our organization. And we know what our roles are, and we're rowing in that direction. And I think that helps the safety, so to speak, which is, I think, an odd word, but it means that you're very comfortable, and that whether it's spoken word, actions, behaviors, or feelings, that you all are in it for the right reasons. And yes, we all make mistakes and say something that isn't as eloquent as we might have liked after it came out. And so it's that facilitation, not only that the leader should do. I mean, everybody should start doing it in a truly performing team.
So, Amy, I wanted to jump to a topic that's challenging for a lot of leaders, recognition and rewards. You see so many companies, they'll start a recognition program and it'll fade away after a few months. They'll start another one 2 years later, etc., etc. How do you build a sustainable program where you're recognizing those who really, contribute to the company and really allow them to shine?
Yeah. I think you used a key word, sustainable. I think, flavor of the day reward programs, other than probably in a commercial sales function, can rebound into all kinds of maybe less or sub than optimal situations. So I think consistency is a word that I would say, in something that's sustainable. Clearly, any rewards should be tied to the greater good of what the company's doing and those objectives and those goals. But I think where the rewards programs get awry is when there's not a clear reason or metric around what these rewards are about, and there's not consistency and perhaps fairness in how they're evaluated and chosen. Discretionary is an interesting word that is, sometimes in these reward systems, sometimes in bonuses, sometimes in all kinds of those things that happen generally once a year. And so I'm a proponent of making it very clear of why this reward is being earned. Does it tie to what in our strategic plan?
Mm-hmm.
Being consistent, if it's going to happen every March, then it happens every March. If it's going to happen every quarter because it's tied to our quarterly updates, then that's enough. But what's the consistency of it? And then who's achieving it and how do you celebrate that? In this case, I'm a firm believer of you publish the rewards. If they're metric and consistent and there's a tie to that end state, then publicize it amongst the company. Everybody should celebrate and be rallying for that person who is achieving it. And that also comes back to bonuses. I mean, the structure of bonuses and the metrics. There's some companies that I've gone into and people know that they have a X% of their bonus, but they really don't know how they earn it or don't earn it. They just like to get a check, and sometimes they don't like the check and sometimes they do. And so rewards as well as bonus and any incentive is really meant to be a way to rally the organization forward in a holistic way. And so the more that you can tie them to that, rallying towards that end state that the company wants or the leader or the need of the organization, consistency in applying those metrics and then sharing, and so that people understand, and hopefully it rallies them to be internally the right level, not hyper competitive and not competitive with each other, but competitive to move that company forward and be part of that is being called out up above and beyond other great people that they're working around.
Yeah. So, I understand what you're putting together, and it seems like a very clear system. But a lot of organizations out there, they lack clear KPIs, or at least they lack them outside of their commercial functions, where it's very easy to measure sales, but if product development's working on a 2-year product, what's the clear metric for this quarter that will say that the team has knocked it out of the park? So, in those cases where there aren't those clear KPIs, how do you go about recognizing in a sustainable and fair fashion?
Well, if I'm there, I'll build them for you.
Okay,
I mean,
that's the
that's the
answer.
purpose, right? I mean, everything should be tied. If we have a 10% growth, a 2% growth, whatever that is organizationally, the way that I like to see it, and I hope many people do this, is you're cascading all the way down to every function. So your product development people do have that metric. It's equated in what they need to do to get to support that. That's all, it's getting everybody in the boat and giving them a row, and they know what they're doing. That comes back to that ownership piece of the metrics, of which I, as a contributor and my functional area, contribute to the broader strategic objectives that are getting our goal. So hopefully that, that's the first, I guess, response. If that's not there, again, I would say build it, because if you don't have that, then one person gets a reward and the other doesn't, and you have an ever ending, and that also breaks down the trust that we want to build. If you don't have it and you can't build it, you need to do something, or potentially I would call the rewards, because I think they can have more damage, especially if just discretionary, than reward, and your culture is impacted completely by what people perceive and what is real and how they are feeling. And so, the person who is shining sees that somebody that they don't see shine, receiving something, and that can obviously cause something. The best leader is transparent and say, no, they got this because of that. And that's where that original, question you asked me is make sure you publish it then when there is a outlier that is a reward system beyond bonus and other incentives that are planned in an individual's plan. If there's a reward system for something else, it should be then very well articulated what that metric was and why it was received and achieved.
So, Amy, one of the challenges that we're facing now more than we did a few years ago is remote working and hybrid working. And so we have a lot more teams these days that are partially remote or fully remote. How do you go about ensuring that those people who aren't in the home office receive the same level of recognition and have the same opportunity to contribute and to shine in a company?
Yeah, I think, it is hard, and we've all come off the pandemic, and we've all worked in hybrid, and I think it's hard when people have different schedules. It's hard when people have different locations. You name it. I think technology has a huge play, not to take the obvious and put it out there, but without technology, we aren't anything. So companies that, weren't maybe to the technological savvy that they needed to be before the pandemic certainly caught up, I believe. At least that would be my hypothesis. And going forward, I think augmenting that more, if you do have hybrid, is going to be a really good investment. Beyond that, then, from the softer side of leadership is making sure that you get your team together at least once a month. That could be a very informal, it could be a very business minded, but once a month would be my rule of thumb, that team has to unite, and it can be virtual. I think once a quarter, if possible, depending on how spread out. Obviously, if you're a global company, that's not going to work. Once a year would be mandatory, so to speak, of coming together. Human beings, I think, need each other and need to see each other and evolve together, to be together, to get, what we talked about earlier in trust. But I think the face-to-face is ideal. You can't always have that. So that's a once a year at least. 4 times a year better for maybe, regional companies or companies that are able to navigate that. The conversations, though, and the teaming are a must. And the bigger the team, the harder that is. But I would say those conversations that bring you back to what are our objectives, what are our milestones for this month, and reporting in and using that as the conduit to making sure everybody's still aligned and on the same page. Also to address the barriers. I mean, as good leaders, we always want to make sure that if there's something that our team is facing, anyone individually or together, that we are removing those barriers. So those discussions also enhance that team's ability to perform. And if they really do truly have each other's backs, they're not only looking for their own self-development, but they're looking for the person next to them and all the people on their team for that development and that help. And if someone's falling down in a true trusting, performing team, they're going to help one another. And that's the beauty. So however you create that, whether it's, informal meetings every Friday for coffee hour and every, following Monday, you do more of the objective meeting and tackling that. Everybody finds their own way, but it's the ensuring that you're bringing that team together and focused, as well as some informal mix together to keep that going would be, I think, the solution that has been leveraged, at least in my experience.
So, I mean, and let me ask you the same question, but in the opposite direction. You'll see a lot of headlines about, Amazon is insisting people who do not return to office will not be eligible for promotion, yada, yada, yada. How do we take the leaders who, were successful and, have built their career in pre-COVID times? How do we help them move into an era where they're more comfortable with hybrid and remote working?
I think this is almost like a political question it's become, because
It has,
there,
isn't it?
there definitely is 2 courts out there. One is we will come back to the office, and the other is
Come back to the
we
office.
won't come back to the office. And I think, again, I don't know which is right, but I think what the reality of it is those of us who recognize that there's a really hard labor pool out there in some areas, we've got to mend that, and we've got to figure out. I mean, you cannot have a completely different plan for every employee. I recognize that, believe me, but you do have to have some flexibility for employees, but it also has to be equitable and fair. And so those are the conundrums that I think we're in on both sides, respectfully, that you have to bridge it. You have to bridge it for your company. I think you have to bridge it by functional areas. I mean, when you oversee during a pandemic, a full manufacturing essential working plant, and you've got your office people and you segregate them for all good reason because of the pandemic, the animosity between the two can get great. So how do you address that? If you don't address it, you're going to have more problems. And so it's no different right now. How do you navigate it so that everybody in the company is feeling good about whether they're hybrid, whether they're not hybrid, whether the company's hybrid, whether the company's blended? And I think that's the transparency part of talking it through. And there is no right answer, because every company is different and every situation is different, but you do have to come into some rhyme or reason for your company of, this is our best laid plan, and this is where we want you to reside. And what that looks like for every company is very different, because every company is different, but it should be predicated on how you serve your customer, how you manage your core competencies and what you do and what you are, putting into the world, so to speak. And then your employees need to align to that. And unfortunately, if that alignment isn't good for them, they will self-select, or they should self-select. As an organization, you also have to know that if your control limits are too thin, you're not going to attract some of the wonderful people that you probably could get in. So that's the, that's the looking in the mirror. That's the finding out what is best for my company. And I think the other alternative that can make that control limit a little bit less finite is by functional area. And looking at functional areas, functional teams that, if you're an engineer, we need you here to be innovating on these days. And maybe these days are your navel gazing or your balcony time where you're thinking of the innovation and studying the marketplace. Again, I'm using that as one example of many within the functional areas. And that could be an alternative or a scenario for any company that's not sure how to navigate it. Did that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. The fundamental fact is, as you say, there is a section of the labor pool that you won't have access to if you are in person. And so is it worth it or not? What is your business demand?
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, a company is there to do something, right? And if it's serving a customer, if it's the greater good, whatever it is, there has to be activities that support that. So, for right or wrong, we all can't be from home, but for right or wrong, we all maybe aren't, working on the assembly line either. And again, both are wonderful, wonderful things for the company. And we have to recognize that and then manage that in a way that is healthy for all.
Amy, what's the role that vision plays in all this? How can you use a vision to, inspire employees and drive them to shine?
Great question. So vision is and should be at the, kind of the North Star for the organization. And vision comes with hopefully a lot of foresight, a lot of understanding of the market of which you play, the competition within, and just the entire market landscape. It should involve your operational competencies and capabilities, which include a lot of things. And then it should involve your talent and how your talent rise to that. So that vision is really the North Star for the organization. And so the communication of that, the reinforcement of that, all that plays into, and I think aligns perfectly with the topics on how do you have a team member that is going to shine, or how do you really develop, talent on your team that shines. It comes back to sharing that vision and communicating it, very, very openly, very, very effectively, very, very much to align that team to be accountable, to own it, to think forward thinking, to continually be in a safe environment where they can bring up the comments that they want to help us do that optimization, to constantly have that evolutionary mindset that's going to take us forward. And with that, I mean, the outcome, is not only in the engagement of those employees, the ownership that they have, and the development and growth that they have internally, but it's the growth for the company, which inspires a stronger, smarter vision and mission. And the values are then reinforced. So that it all kind of comes back together. And yes, the vision is that North Star, and we've got to make sure we have a good vision and that it's tangible and it's attainable and it's longer sight with the short-term milestones that everybody rallies around and feels good about moving it forward. And so that culminates, I guess, would be my response to how vision ties into, right down to that heart and soul, that gut of that employee, that talent that is so precious.
Thank you.